come on. So you guys got that. No, maybe not. You got there. Yes? Alright, so this is where we're going to be then. Talking about Columbus and the stuff that he did. All that fun stuff. Questions before we get crack-a-lacking?
What's the date?
Today is the 10th.
Okay, this one, I have one of those. What is that?
Who played with that? Well, I said, so, before I forget, did you guys pick up one of the blogs? You guys still need one of these? Anyway, just pick one up on your way out. But what this is it's an excerpt from The Art of War, which is a book written by a general from the 2nd century BC. It's by Sun Tzu. And what's interesting about that book is that while it's been studied for its applications to generals and warriors, it's also been frequently studied by business people. Because one of the big aspects you'll find with commanding armies in running a business is you have to have understanding of logistics. So that's really what this is all about, is logistics. And so the questions I'm asking you basically are, how does Sun Tzu, what does he say is best, and how do you go about doing that? And then finally, how do you apply that towards business? They're kind of thinking outside the box. Now then, let's talk stuff. First of all, Columbus is going to complete this age of discovery for which European power? Who gives him the money and the ships and all that stuff? Yeah. Good. Spain. Why not Italy? Because he's Italian. Why wouldn't they give him the ships? Yeah. Yeah, they were already controlling the trade route, and the Portuguese. Spain didn't. So this provided them an opportunity, and they took it up. Instead of running into the Indies, though, he runs into the Americas. And despite this, this is going to launch this major competition over the New World. You see, Portugal feels threatened because they say that Spain is claiming territory they've already claimed. So they're willing to go to war to fight for it. So in order to avoid a war, the Pope, Alexander VI, has them agree to a compromise. He draws the line of demarcation, and then later, the Treaty of Tordesillas is drawn up, which separates South America between the eastern portion, which is going to go to Portugal, and the western portion, which goes to Spain. So basically, this is going to avoid a war between Portugal and Spain, but also means that those two cultures are going to heavily influence those regions in Latin America. Now, are these nations themselves out fighting these wars and competing? Not really, no. You see, the way that it works, especially in India, is the various countries of Europe form companies where noblemen and incredibly wealthy middle-class individuals will donate money into one compact to go and fight or control the trade routes. These are called East India companies. The one that's going to emerge as victorious is the Dutch East India Company. However, the Portuguese are going to go first, and they create this trade route, start establishing with India, and then the Dutch are going to move in and settle that in. So, again, it's sort of a roundabout way of fighting for territory, but it also kind of makes sense because it allows you to separate the economics from the politics. Kind of. So, what powers does the East India Company have? Well, they can raise taxes, they can raise armies and navies, they can basically exert all legal authority in a region. So, in essence, they're kind of like countries in their own right. And I don't know if you guys have seen Pirates of the Caribbean, the second and third one especially, they talk about the East India Trading Company. We're talking about, in that case, the British East India Trading Company. But again, each of these powers has one of their own. Okay? Okay. So, what does circumnavigate mean? Any idea? It means to go all the way around something. The first guy ever to do that to the world is who? Anybody know? It's the first person to circumnavigate the globe. Often they say Magellan, but in truth, he never actually made it. He ended up dying along the way, but technically he's credited with it because he was leading the expedition that does it. So we'll get to that. Pictures. So that's the line of demarcation there on the right. It was established in 1493. A year later, the Treaty of Tordesillas moves that line because Portugal was a little upset, saying that Spain got too much, and that puts it there. What's that? Anyone know? Yeah. Not compass. Look at the face. We were talking about navigation yesterday. This is an astrolabe. It's one of those devices that, because of the Renaissance, we get them and are able to utilize them for going out and navigating and fun stuff like that. So, Vasco Nunez de Balboa is the guy who first proposed the idea of this other ocean. He sees it, amazed by it. The guy who names it, though, is Magellan. Now, what Magellan is going to try to do is find Northwest Passage. Northwest Passage, not so much. Southwest Passage, absolutely. Basically, what he's going to do is he's going to sail west, hit the Caribbean, start sailing south, go around South America, and then he ends up following the Strait of Magellan, which, by the way, is one of the most dangerous waterways in the world. We're talking really fast water, really quite narrow, lots of rocks and hidden obstacles. To such a degree that some people thought it wasn't even really possible. He must have not been able to do it. Instead, went around Cape Good Hope, Cape Horn. But in truth, he did manage to do that. They found it later. So, the voyage began in 1519 and ends 3 years later. In truth, there was quite a bit of failure to it. I believe he had something in the neighborhood of 11 ships, something like that, and only one of them made it back. It was very perilous. Lots of people lost their life, including Magellan himself, due to all kinds of problems, scurvy, diseases, things like that. Which, by the way, do you guys know what scurvy is? It's a disease you get when you don't have enough vitamin C. And fresh fruit's hard to come by. Now, what's interesting is the natives that he encountered in South America had him basically give his crew a tea that was made from a tree leaves, basically. I think it was an evergreen. And they found that it actually has elements of vitamin C. So this was a way of kind of allowing his men to survive. Even so, it was a tough journey. Despite all the hardships and really kind of the disaster of it all, it still hails a success for a couple of reasons. One, it does prove possible and you can do it. Second of all, it allows us to measure the world. We know more or less how big it is at this point, and it's very big. It encounters new places that no one had discovered before. The woods and other goods that are brought back are going to pay for the expedition, even just one ship making it. So, all in all, it's going to be a success. Not a rousing success, but it does what we're setting out to do in the first place. So, the other major thing with this, by the way, is they were first. You know, Spain gets to have a big old party and feel really good about themselves, and we did it. We did what everyone thought wasn't possible. We circumnavigated the globe. So this is sort of a big deal. And, gives you bragging rights. That's pretty exciting. Okay. One other thing that Magellan did is he names the Pacific Ocean. Do you guys know the word Pacific, what it means? Do you know what passive means? You're passive. Kind of peaceful ocean. Balboa said he would love to take a boat and sail it because it was such a calm and wonderful water, things like that. So, again, peaceful ocean, peaceful sea. Any questions? Okay. Well, I'll let you finish that up, and we're going to start on China with the following words: Ming Dynasty, Hongwu, Nolo, Shanghai, Manchus, Qing Dynasty, Kongxi. And I apologize ahead of time if I'm totally butchering those pronunciations. I'll make first of all that Chinese is not a language I know sort of can pronounce very easily. So, again, if I offended anyone, I apologize for that purposes. So, anyways, one thing I will point out with the reading that you guys will be doing with the Art of War is that it has elements based in early Confucianism. You guys know who Confucius was? He was a philosopher. And some of his teachings involve morality, as well as how to properly run a good and just government. How do you treat people fairly, things like that. In addition, it was under Confucius that the Chinese adopted its testing system, which actually was really ahead of its time in a lot of ways. Because if you think about it, what gets you the jobs that you want? Is the classes you take? Not the tests that you take, really. I mean, even your college degree, in many cases, to get a job, you have to take tests that certify you for whatever it is you want to do. So Confucius kind of had this mindset, before you put someone in a position where they're going to, control the fates of hundreds of people, you might want to make certain that they know what they're doing. So the testing system emerged to make certain that only the best and brightest would get positions in government. The problem was, though, is that, and many times you have the best and brightest, but that didn't mean they were moral. Knowing about morality and actively pursuing morality are not the same thing. So what tends to happen, we see a lot of ways in big bureaucracies, is corruption occurs. And it's not just China, it's every bureaucracy around the world. It's just, they're no different. But what really makes that outstanding is that they came up with these ideas thousands of years ago. So we're talking about their empire. We're talking thousands, not hundreds of years. And that's pretty significant. The fact that they are able to more or less survive despite being invaded and despite all the wars and famines and other hardships that they face, it's pretty telling of their dedication and getting things right. So we're talking about the Ming dynasties, the Qing dynasties. First of all, can someone tell me, what is a dynasty? What does that word mean? Yeah. Sort of. I think I watched Duck Dynasty.
Oh.
What's that show all about? Yeah.
It's like about a family business, and they make duck calls.
What's the first word you said there?
Business, family business.
Family. A dynasty is all about the ruling family. It's a succession of people who are a part of the same family. So when we say we have a new dynasty, what are we saying? We have a new ruling family. Okay, so that's significant. China is really good at taking conquerors and making them Chinese. What I mean by that is, if you look at the Mongols are basically barbarians. They're roving nomads who make their living out herding sheep and fighting for scarce resources. The Chinese are agricultural. They sit in their cities and towns and farm. There's absolutely nothing similar between these two cultures. So when the Mongols invade, you would think they would destroy all the farms and basically have all the herds flocked and things like that. But often what we see happen is that, well, that might happen initially with the conquering phase, the Chinese have this really good bureaucracy, this really good system of running an empire, and they take that and they merge with their empire. Despite that, the Mongols are still really looked down upon, partially because of racism. They don't like the Mongols, they're different race, people hate them. Second of all, because frankly, they're really taking other systems and bringing them to China, not really Chinese. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a popular rebellion against the Mongols in the Yuan dynasty, as we call their dynasty, by Hong Hui, and he is going to establish the Ming dynasty. So we're going to return China back to a Chinese way of doing things, based on Confucian ideals and morality, kind of stuff you're talking about with the testing system, but also with having a strong bureaucracy and a big importance of farming. Confucius didn't really approve of merchants. So, for instance, he was really saying that basically merchants make their money off of theft and giving money to foreigners. And there is a little bit of xenophobia in China. Xenophobia is a fear of aliens, by the way, not just like, aliens from outer space, takes with people from other countries. We'll get to why that is later. But suffice it to say, by returning this, we're going to bring back Chinese idealism, and people are going to really support that. Despite that, he's still going to become pretty paranoid by the end of his reign. He ends up assassinating several of his bureaucrats, folks like that, because he fears that they're plotting against him, they're going to assassinate him. So, what ends up happening is that once he dies, there's a scramble for power. All his sons fight, and in the end, the one who ends up emerging victorious is Yongle. Now, he has two major contributions of interest to us. First and foremost, he moves the capital to Beijing. Well, why would that matter? Well, what's the current capital of China? Beijing. In addition to that, if you look at where it's gone, we're going to be moving to an area farther north. Okay? That is going to change the lives of people around it. Anytime you have a capital city, power tends to go around it. However, of course, I would say Frankfurt's perhaps a little bit different than that, because we've been in Frankfurt, basically it's some government buildings and Arby's. But other capital cities do project power, wealth, and prestige, so that's going to matter quite a bit. The other thing he does is he encourages the voyages of, I'm really terrible with this name, I think it's like Jean Pe, something like that. But, anyways, does anyone know what I'm talking about with that? The voyages of this guy? You want to catch that from the reading last night? Who is this guy? What did he do? Yeah. Yep. The voyages of Sun Tzu. Basically, he is going to be an explorer. And as he's going around, he's expanding the influence of the empire. Now, here's the thing you have to understand. And again, you'll see somewhat with our discussion of the art of war. Do you have to destroy an enemy to win a battle, or to conquer or to raise your empire? In fact, that is the least desirable outcome. The outcome you want is to take control of places without any bloodshed. Because people are people are people. Economically speaking, it's good because they'll continue working, continue raising money, taxes, things like that, which benefits you, but also benefits your territory. The equivalent of this would be like taking over a house by burning it down first. You can do that, but that's not a very smart idea. So this is all about politics. Basically, this fleet is massive. There's a really great little graphic in the textbook, some of you guys have open, of one of Columbus's ships next to one of Sun Tzu's. And you can see that there's quite a size difference. This navy was the envy of the world, which is funny because Europeans didn't really notice too much about it. Despite this, after the voyages, you guys know what happens to the Navy? The whole mass of ships, they're burned to the ground. They're destroyed. We'll get to why later. But as they're going along, they're bringing gifts. They are bringing silver and silks and accepting oaths of fealty to the Chinese throne, which many people give, trying to impress the emperor and get him into good graces and hope to be part of something greater. When they start getting to Europeans, though, they're not nearly as interested. They're unwilling in many cases to even administer the proper courtesies to an emperor, which is to bow and place your head to the ground 9 times. Which bow is a fascinating thing in ways, because in many ways it conveys more than a handshake. Like, don't get me wrong, you can tell some things about somebody by how they shake your hand, whether it's like really loose in your hand or it's strong and firm, things like that. But otherwise, bowing also conveys social status. For instance, who bows first? And usually the person who is of lesser rank. Secondly, the degree at which you bow, it's just kind of a gentle thing, that's signifying that you're more or less equal in status. If it's really deep, however, you're saying the person is more elevated in status than you are. If it's the emperor, you get all the way on the ground. This is why once you moving you on, what happens when the emperor bows to Yuan? Just that much is all he does. Everyone else sinks to the ground because he has elevated her above himself. And if he's the highest pinnacle of society, he does that, well, everyone else better get as low as you can go. So, what's the effect of this? Well, China expands some of its tributary states, but it's also going to be exploratory. We're going to find out more what lays beyond. And to be perfectly honest, the Chinese aren't terribly impressed, especially with Europeans, because if you think about it, the European goods do not compare to Chinese goods. You know, for instance, Europeans we have clay pots, we have porcelain, we've got steel, our steel is better, we've got cotton, we've got silk, we've got money, we'll take your money. That's pretty much what it comes down to, because, you know, money was made of silver. You can always, you know, take that and kind of do what you do. But China was 11 years ahead of Europeans. And that ultimately is one of the problems we're going to find, because what happens is China basically sees themselves as the superior culture. And they are going to isolate themselves. Isolationism is basically where a culture or a country, I suppose, doesn't allow in outsiders and doesn't really get involved in global affairs. This is important. The United States did this twice. Both times we did it, it ended in a world war. So when you look at kind of all-encompassing grasp things like Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, all these things, American hegemony is the word. The reason that Americans kind of do this is because, well, when we didn't, it's ended really poorly, among other things. Now, here's what happens next. The Ming are going to rule for 200 years. Now, first of all, that's just kind of fascinating. We're just and for 200 years they do this thing. 200 years! Basically as long as our country has existed. Not quite. But still, it's just kind of fascinating. They're trying to do this for 200 years. And then, what happens? Well, China's going to be conquered by the Manchu, which are a group of barbarians, very, very similar to Mongols and Turks, from this area of northern China. You might have heard of Manchuria. Chow, that's where they're from. And they are going to take the empire and establish their own dynasty. This is going to be the Qing dynasty. And under the Qing, they are going to expand China to its largest size. By the time they're done, it's going to be encompassing most of Southeast Asia, all the way into India in parts, and up into near Mongolia. So it's going to be a massive empire. The thing that they're going to do to try to win people over is under Kung Xi, they are going to reduce taxes. Now, first of all, he is not the first Manchu emperor, let me at that point, but he is one of the most famous. He's one of the most important. And here's the thing, whenever you reduce taxes, no one likes to pay taxes, this is true. And the problem is if you reduce taxes, you've got to do one of two things. You either got to cut what you're spending government money on, or you've got to go into debt. So how are we don't want to go into debt, so how do we avoid this? Well, there's a number of ways we can reduce government expenditures. The way he does it is basically by streamlining the bureaucracy. See, bureaucracies work, but the problem is they tend to be inefficient. They tend to like to spend money on things that they really don't need to, and there's a lot of wasted stuff. A lot of unnecessary hoops for things that you might need to do. And by getting rid of some of those loopholes and things like that, you have less money wasted, and so you can save without actually reducing whatever it is you would normally be doing. So this is what he does, and people love him for it. So he is able to kind of do all these things, expand the empire, stuff like that, and kind of usher in China to more or less a golden age. Some might argue that that's the Warring States period, and that's just because like a lot of it's kind of like the most famous story, sort of like in America, like the American West, or the Revolution is kind of like our most famous moments in history. It's kind of theirs, but anyways. So Kongzi, we talked about him, and then let's talk about isolationism. So what's the effects of isolationism for China? Oh, I forgot about art. I'll come back to that. First of all, it's going to be used by both the Ming and the Qing dynasties, and the purpose is because, as we've already said, China is the superior culture. So if we interact and mix with European cultures, adopt their stuff, that's inferior. So we'll actually be weaker, our culture will suffer, and we don't want that. So the best option is to just not interact with them at all. To put this in a more cause and effect relationship perspective, one of the big ideas in East Asia about your emperors and kings is that they're not merely political figures. They believe in the idea of the mandate of heaven, which is that the gods of the heavens themselves have placed this person on the throne to rule in their name. So it's not just the people appointing them, it's the very gods. That's significant because, how do you rebel against heaven? You really can't. Now, let's say that we have interaction with the Jesuits. These Christian missionaries are spreading the faith of Catholicism in China. If you believe in the Christian God, then can you believe that the mandate of heaven is true? Not so much. So this is challenging politics. So again, let's keep those influences outside, and this is where they would protect. They would only allow Europeans to trade in 4 places. It was all controlled through the government. Secondly, what's going to happen in Europe is through the scientific revolution, we are going to have the beginnings of the industrial age. Warfare and military technology dramatically changed in Europe, so that by the 19th century, Europe has completely gone past China, and they haven't been advancing, they haven't been industrializing. And when the Europeans show up, they basically just steamroll and conquer everything. So that's going to leave them weak, and they're really not going to gain independence again until the 20th century. So there's going to be a long-lasting impact in regards to the European states. Any questions about any of this? Okay. That's it for today, folks. You're losing your stuff, I can see it. Easy.